Daf Yomi is Sanhedrin Daf Tezvav, Sanhedrin 15, dedicated to a shmir for the Chayalim, Matzal for the Shvuyim, and Yeshua for Am Yisrael. This Eis Tzara, we're going to start on the bottom of 14b, 2 lines from the bottom. 14b, 2 lines from the bottom. The Gemara had said that Erechin Hamataltlin, Erechin is a technical term used for a person who says, Erech Alai, my value is to the temple. The Erech, and the Torah gives a very specific amount for that. So Erechin is associated with human beings, and Metaltlin is something associated, means movable. So there are two terms that are mutually exclusive. So what does it mean? My Erechin HaMetaltlin, asks the Gemara. What does it mean that Erechin Metaltlin is adjudicated before a court of three? So Amarav Gidel Amarav, Amarav is going to give like several answers to this question. First answer, Ba'omer Erech Kui Ze'alai, where a person says the value of this utensil is upon me. He said something nonsensical. It doesn't make sense. In either an Erech Alai or Kui Ze'alai, not Erech Kui Ze'alai. These are two mutually exclusive terms. And so where he says that Amarav Gidel Amarav, Ba'omer Erech Kui Ze'alai on top of 15a, no saying dumb of it. To teach us, we might have thought that he said something, so we ignore the statement because he said a thing that was not necessary. He said a thing that was nonsensical. No, he's saying no. He has to give that value to the temple. My taima, because the Gemara's reasoning is Adam Yodea Shein Erech L'Kli. A person knows that Erech doesn't go with utensil. The Gamar Ba'amar L'Shem Danan. So it's clear that he meant I'm giving the value of this utensil. That's what he meant. Mishum Hachi no saying dumb. That's why he has to give the value. So Gemara says, but we have a technical problem with that. The words don't work. Hi Erechin HaMetaltlin, it would be not the Erechin HaMetaltlin. That's not the appropriate language. The appropriate language is, hold on, I have to stop my. The appropriate language is Erechin Shel Metaltlin. If you're correct, it would be the Erechin of Metaltlin, by the way. So the Gemara says, okay, no problem. And amend the text to say, Erechin Shel Metaltlin. That's what you just amend the text to say that. Rav Chisda Amar, Rav Chisda says, Avimi, Rav Chisda Amar Avimi b'matfis metaltlin la'erchin. So no, what we're talking about a different case. He says, well, what he's done is he said, he said, I'm giving my value. And so then he has to, let's say he's 20 as a specific amount in the Torah, and he had movables, and he said, this will be to pay for the money that I owe to the temple. And so therefore, these utensils have a kedusha on them that he has to redeem them. And so therefore, we need 3 people to evaluate how much you owe to redeem them from hektish. Basically, he made the movables were on 15 AJ. So then Gemara says, well, there's another problem with that. Hi, Erechin HaMetaltlin. It's Metaltlin Shel Erechin. The language of the Mishnah should not have been Erechin HaMetaltlin, but the Metaltlin of the Erechin, the Metaltlin that were basically made as a collateral for the Erechin, by the way. So the Gemara says, okay, Tani Metaltlin Shel Erechin. Okay, that's the text you shall use. Then the Gemara says a third approach. Rabbi Avo says, Ba'omer Be'erechi Alai. He says, I'm giving my Erech. We're on 15a, Jeff. Here's the Gemara in front of you, 15a. We're 15a. And he says, Erech Alai, I owe this money, but he hasn't paid it. So the Kohen is the debt collector. The Kohen comes to collect. Now, if he's collecting from his movable, then they need to evaluate it. If he's coming to collect from movables, then you have to evaluate how much is this watch worth. You need a court of 3. And if you're doing real estate, you need a court of 10. So I understand the first 2 approaches. If you want to say we're taking it away from hektish, because in the first 2 approaches, he's saying, I have to give the value of this utensil. So therefore, you basically want to redeem it from hektish. So therefore, you have to give you have to evaluate to make sure you're not taking money from hektish. But the third approach, the court is coming to just give the amount to the temple, to seize it for the temple. Why do we need 3 for that? It's logical you should need 3. For both, you need three. What does it matter if you're going up or going into Hektish or taking away from Hektish? Came my time. If you're redeeming from Hektish, why do you need three? Delma time. Maybe you'll make a mistake. Yuinami, well, if you're taking it into the temple, Dilma time, maybe you'll make a mistake, and you'll make a mistake and not in the temple's favor. So therefore, you need a court of three. Rabbi Yehuda says that one of them has to be a Kohen. So Rabbi Yehuda says one of the people on this court has to be a Kohen. Because it says in the pasuk Vericha Kohen. So therefore, one of them has to be a Kohen. Or Rabbanan Kohen Lamaru. So according to Rabbanan, who say you don't need one of them to be a Kohen, why does it say Kohen in the verse? He says caution. It's difficult according to the Rabbanan. Akarko is Tisha Kohen. If you have real estate that you had dedicated to the temple, you want to redeem it, you need 9 and a Kohen. What's the source of the idea that you need 9 and a Kohen? Amar Shmuel, because in the pasuk in the Psukim, they talk about redeeming an animal, a utensil, a person, a Kohen. Real estate, it talks about Asar Kohanim Ksuvim B'Parasha. In this passage where it talks about the redemption from the temple, the word Kohen is written 10 times. Chadal Guf wanted to teach us this fundamental idea that the evaluation is done by a Kohen. And Hanach and the remaining 9 are what's called have a miut achar miut. It's like a double negative, an exclusion after an exclusion. The miut achar miut el rabos. Whenever you have a double negative, it becomes a positive. So you have an exclusion after exclusion. It's telling us we don't need a Kohen. Now, Yisrael, and if there are 9 Israelites for echad Kohen, and one of them is a Kohen, it's going to be sufficient. So Ma'azke for Ravuna Berei Rav Nasan, Ema Chamisha Kohanim Chamisha Yisraelim. So maybe it's 5 Kohanim and 5 Yisrael, meaning say maybe after each double negative, the next one is actually to tell us you do need a Kohen, goes back. So kasha, so it's difficult. The Adam Kayote Ben, and also a person that it says is also you need 9 Yisrael and a Kohen, our Mishnah said. So the Gemara says, well, how can you be sanctifying a person? Adam Mikadosh. You can't sanctify a person to the temple. Amaravo. Omer Dami Alai. No, you say I'm going to give the value of this person. Tanya Omer Dami Alai. Person says I'm going to give them my value, not my erach, but my damim, my monetary value. Shamano so ke'eved kaber shok. You evaluate him like a slave. What's his market on the slave market, and eved is kashlakakos, and a slave is comparable to real estate. And today is not much different. You determine a person's value today. How do you need to determine a person's value? If let's say like the person was killed and you go to the insurance company, you have to pay. So how do they determine their value? They determine how much you would make in the marketplace, how much money you'd make. And if you were going to make if you're going to be a lawyer, you make more money than a rabbi. Yeah, so a lawyer is worth more money than the rabbi. That's what the way we do it, because they have to have a formula. And it's like a lot of people were killed in 9/11. They had a whole commission to determine how much money each person was entitled to. They evaluate what their worth was going to be on the basis of how much money they cost their family. So it's not much different today. By Rabbi Avin, so the person who's going to be evaluated, so that let's say there's a person who sanctified the hair, and so that's basically the question. So basically, the point is the person sanctified the hair that was already grown. Let's say you have hair that's ready to be cut because it's grown so much, and now he wants to redeem it. So how do you redeem this hair that he's consecrated? So the question is, do we view it as though it's detached from the person? It's like a movable object. It's just hair. It's removed from the body. The hair is a value. What are you going to use hair for? You can use it like a rubber band. You can use it for all sorts of things to cover up a hole. You can use it. Rashi doesn't give that specific example, but it could use it for a wig, presumably. Under certain circumstances, I don't know exactly, but so Sarah So do we say Do we say we view it as though it's already detached and and therefore you need 3? Or view it as though it's attached to the person. It's like a person and you need 10. So basically you consecrate the hair and the hair is ready to be cut, but it's not yet cut. So Gemara says, well, let's look at this from the following scenario. Tashma makdish es abdo, a moembo. It says if a person consecrates their slave, there's no me'ila on him. What's me'ila? Me'ila is the misappropriation of temple property. If you accidentally misuse temple property and you get benefit from it, that's called me'ila. So if somebody consecrates a slave, there's no me'ila. Rashbag Omer. And why not? Why is there no me'ila? Because the slave is a human being, and the human being is considered like real estate, and there's no me'ila on real estate. Whereas Rab Shvag says, Moem Bisaro, you have misappropriation of his hair. Meaning to say the me'ila applies to the hair. V'kaimel the Bisaro Gozes Pligi. And we assume that they're discussing a case where they have hair, where the slave has hair on him, but it's ready to be cut. He needs a haircut. So that's a dispute. And Shema Mina. So therefore, that's a dispute. It's whether or not if the hair is ready to be cut, it's a dispute between the Rabbanan who say that it's considered like it's on the body, and Rabbi Shimon Gamliel who views it as though it's already cut. The Gemara says, well, name it Hani tonight, Hani tonight. Maybe it's the same dispute which we had elsewhere already. We had in Bam Metzia, you might remember. We had in Gittin. The Rabbi Meir says there are certain things that are like real estate, but are not exactly right real estate, and the Chachamim don't agree with them. What are these things? So we have a source. Kate had Ezer Gafanim. It says in the Mishnah, let's say you have 10 vines, to Unos, Masar Tilcha. A guy says, I gave you 10 vines, and they had on them grapes. The guy says, you only gave me 5. So there's a principle called Modib Mixus. If you have a partial admission, that you have to take an oath. But you don't have this law of partial admission where you have to take an oath doesn't apply to real estate. So here in this case, he says, I gave you 10 grapevines, and the guy says, no, you only gave me 5. So Rameir says, yes, take an oath, and the sages say, no, he doesn't have to take an oath because it's like real estate. And even though there's grapes on it, they're attached to the ground. And what's a dispute about? In other words, there it's a dispute about grapes that are ready to be cut. So Mar Savar, so Rameir says, Kibbutzuras Tamin. Since they're ready to be cut, it's like it's cut already. Mar Savar Lav Kibbutzuras Tamin. Whereas the Rabbanan say it's not like it's cut. So it's the same thing as the hair. Mar says, no, I feel it to Rabbi Meir. No, Rameir would say that in the case of the hair, he would view it as though it is not cut. Why? Adkan will come Rabbi Meir Hasam. Why does Rabbi Meir say by the grapevines that it's the grapes that are ready to be cut, we view it as though it's cut? The longer you leave them on the grapevine, the grapes get worse. They're going to get ruined. So therefore, we view it as though it's already cut. The hair, the longer you leave it and you don't cut it, it gets better and better and better. It gets more geschmack. So therefore, it doesn't view it as though it's cut necessarily. Din Nefashos, a capital case, is going to be judged before a court of 23. And then the Mishnah said, if you are Roveya, if you sodomize an animal, if you basically a man who has intercourse with an ox, Vanirba, or the ox has intercourse with the man, in either case, the man and the ox are judged before a court of 23. So that's what the Gemara says. Kapasik fatani loshna roveya zachar v'loshna roveya nekeva. It doesn't matter if the ox sodomizes a man or a woman, it's judged before a court of 23. Bishlam roveya nekeva. I understand if it sodomizes a woman, because it says explicitly in the verse, you kill a man, you kill the woman and the animal. And if it sodomizes a man, how do we know it's judged in front of a court of 23 and put to death? Because it says, there's another verse, whoever sleeps with an animal is put to death. We already have one verse that tells us that a man who sodomizes an animal is put to death. So this must mean a man who is sodomized by the animal. So that's how it says in front of a court of 23. Now, sure, an ox that's stoned. Why is an ox stoned? The ox is stoned because it kills someone, it gores someone the 4th time, it's stoned to death. An ox kills somebody, it's stoned to death. So in front of a court of 23. Shneimar Ashor Yisakel v'gam ba'alav yimaz. K'misas ha'bal and kach misas Ashor. So it said in the verse that the ox is stoned, it's put to death, and also the owner is put to death. We learned in the Gemara, we know that it means in Baba Kama, remember we said it means that the owner has to pay. But here we say that it means when it says that the owner is put to death, it means that the same way in which a human would die, also an ox would die in front of a court of 23. How do we know that that's what the verse is telling us? That the same way the ox, the man would die, so that's the way the ox is put to death. Maybe it's teaching us that the owner is liable for death. If your ox kills somebody, you're put to death. Maybe that's what happens. And in fact, we just had a terrible, story like this in Iran, where a guy was in an accident. A car killed a Muslim, and the Jew was about to be put to death unless he paid a certain amount of money. This was a story. So basically, maybe it's to tell us that the ox is about to be put to death, that the owner of the ox is going to be put to death. Maybe that's what teaches us, that if your ox kills, you're put to death. Now, Gemara says, it would just say, and also the owner. So it wouldn't have said he's put to death. He calls to Rahman. So the Gemara says, why? So the word must be teaching us that the ox dies in the same way as the owner would die. So the Gemara says, but why? I would have thought that we kill the owner of the ox by stoning it to death, just like we stone the ox. And so therefore it says you must that the owner dies, generally speaking, with strangulation. And so therefore the Gemara says, Beskila Salkadaita, why would you think that the owner is put to death with stoning? Kato Iyo, if he himself killed, he's put to death with sayif. He's put to death by a sword, which is less severe than stoning. So if he stones, he's put to death with a sword. And so if his ox kills, you think he's going to be stoned to death? Kato Iyo, if he's put to death, Besayif, Memono, Beskil, if his money kills, he's stoned. That doesn't make sense. The Gemara says, but Dilma, maybe, Haida Katsa Rahmana Yumas, is a Kuyaway, a Fuke Mesayif. Maybe the reason why it says that he's put to death is to be lenient on him and to tell us that he doesn't get the sayif, he doesn't get stoned, but he gets the chenek. Because that if he would have killed somebody, he would get sayif. But if his ox killed somebody, he gets the chenek. So how do we know that the ox is not liable for death? This makes sense according to one who says strangulation is more severe than sayif. It makes sense because you can't say that if a man killed, he'll get sayif, but if the ox kills, he'll get chenek because chenek is more severe. According to one who says that chenek is more lenient than sayif, how can you answer this question? It's possible that the verse is telling us, and when it says you must, it's to tell us that the owner is not gets a lesser death, and he's not but he's not exempt from death. So the Gemara says, don't say that, because it says it says that if the owner of the ox shall pay money. If you're going to say that the owner is liable for death, it says you can't buy your way out of death. The Gemara says, maybe that's the reason what the pasuk is saying. If he kills, he can't buy his way out. Because he gets to death. But maybe if his ox kills, he can pay the fine and be done. How do we know that the owner is not put to death if his ox scores? Says Chizkiah, the one who kills will be put to death because he's the murderer. You only put somebody to death if he kills somebody. But you don't put somebody to death if his ox kills somebody. So now the Gemara asks the question, Shor Sinai Bekama. It says in the pasuk in the Torah in Be'ema. Yeah, the question. Yeah.
So these were, so dueling biblical persons. to extrapolate meaning about the fate of the oaths. And the final verse was the one that struck the blow shall be put to death. He is and I guess the Talmud is saying that that verse trumps the other verses. But why? Because it's more detailed.
Doesn't tell us why, but it's basically the basic idea is that verse is telling us you're only put to death if you kill somebody, but not if your animal kills them. Most must that was his teaching. He had that tradition that that's the way to read that verse. Doesn't say us why this verse is better, but that was the teaching. That's the source that they found inclusive. Sometimes they don't say why they prefer one reading over the other. Shore Sinai. So let's say you have an ox that went up on Mount Sinai while the divine presence was there. It says in the pasuk, it says if an ox or an animal or a man goes up on Mount Sinai while the divine presence is there, he's not going to be able to live. Har Sinai doesn't have residual holiness. It was only holy while the divine presence was there. Once the divine presence left, then everybody was allowed to go up there. That's why I was able to go up there, because it's no longer holy. When the God was there with Moshe, then it was holy. But after, it's just a mountain. Not like the Temple Mount, where you have to sanctify yourself before going on the Temple Mount today. But Har Sinai was different. So let's say the Gemara wants to know if an ox would have gone up on Mount Sinai at that time. It doesn't tell us if one did. But how many judges would it be adjudicated before? Tosfos says, why do we care? What happened? Why is this relevant to our life? It's not at all relevant. Tosfos answers, his answer is, we want to know how to just explain the verses. That's one answer. There's other answers. One is Drosh v'kabel schar. We're going to see later on in our tractate that there are certain mitzvos actually that we're going to be discussing in the end of today's daf and tomorrow's daf, like the Ir Nidachas, city of idolatry that never happened. So why do we talk about them? Just in order to be able to expound them and to receive a reward. So that's another answer about this question. Yeah, Bill, you had a question? Sir, mitzvot.
Abstract discussions.
Discussing them. Exactly right. So Gzera Shava is the exact word, and a Hekesh is there's a comparison between the laws, but it's not necessarily the exact word. Gzera Shava, you need to have a tradition from your teachers going back to Sinai that you can expound it. A Hekesh, you don't need that tradition. So the Gemara, those are two of the differences. So the Gemara says, Mi Gamar Shah Midoros. Do we learn out from the fact that in later generations you're going to need 23 to judge an ox before putting it to death? So also that moment you'd also need 23 well. Or you don't. So Tashma, the Tani Brami Bar Yachazkel, in Behema, Mishlo Yachya, Maish Basar Mishloshaf, Behema Basar Mishloshaf. No, you need 23. We compare it in Behema, Mishlo Yachya, just like a man for 23, so too the ox is 23. Now we're going to the following question. It said in our Mishnah, the lion and the wolf and the bear and the leopard and the bardulas, their death is in front of 23. Rabbi Elazar says whoever comes first to kill them is meritorious. Amar Ishlakish v'hushay miso. Rabbi Elazar says, so there's going to be a dispute in the Gemara about Rabbi Elazar. When Rabbi Elazar says if you kill these animals, then you're meritorious. Does that mean only if the animals have killed first, or even if the animals never hurt anybody? If you kill them, you're meritorious because they pose a threat. All right, Shlakish says, v'hushay miso. So Rish Lakish says, no, it's only if they've killed first. Otherwise, leave the animals alone, or below and be so low. Alma the Kasavar must be a Rish Lakish other position. Yeshlan Tarbas, Yeshlan Balam. You can train a lion, you can train an owner, and they can be owned. And a lion can be owned. You see, Rish Lakish, we know from other Gemaras, was a gladiator. He was there, so he maybe saw lions which were tamed. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, so even though they haven't killed anybody, you've done a good idea to kill them. It says you can't train a lion. It's a threat, and no matter where it is, and nobody could really own it. So therefore, even if a person raised them, he's not their owner, and you could kill them. There's no problem. You could kill them. we have a big problem because you remember, how can Rish Lakish say you could raise these animals as long as they haven't killed anyone? What about, don't you remember the beginning of Baba Kaba where it says a snake is always a muad? Remember, it says at the very beginning there that a snake is always a muad to kill, and the owner always has to pay. So we say, you could say, okay, there's two things. You're always responsible as a muad, but the guy's allowed to raise it and nobody else can come and take it. That's one explanation. Another explanation they give is our study is talking about a case where you're raising them when they're tied up. And so therefore, Rish Lakish says nobody else can come and kill them. But the case in Baba Kama is you have your snakes walking around the house untied up. So those are two possible ways to dovetail it. So Rabbi Yochanan says, no, you can't raise it. You can't domesticate an animal. No owner. Who owns nobody owns the lion. Tanan, Rabbi Eliezer Omer called Kodem Hargon Zacha. So the Gemara says, how can Rish Lakish say that? How can Rish Lakish say that you can own them? It says Rabbi Eliezer says whoever comes along and kills them is meritorious. Bishlam Rabbi Yochanan now makes sense according to Rabbi Yochanan. What does it mean when it says whoever comes along and kills them is meritorious? You would say Lamai Zachal Oran. According to Rabbi Yochanan, you come along and kill them, you get their skin because nobody owns them. El Reish Lakish Lamai Zachal. If you come along and kill them, what have you gotten? The other person owns them. Kiven Shemis. So Kiven Shemisu Shavin Rabbanan Kaman the Gamar Dinayo the Isur Ananinu. So according to Reish Lakish, who says the person not allowed to kill them unless they killed somebody, if that's the case, once they've killed somebody, what's he getting? Because they're sentenced to death, and then you can't have any benefit from them. So he says, no, what does it mean you're benefiting? Benefit to heaven. You've done a good thing for the world. Tanya Kavas the Reish Lakish, we have a price like Reish Lakish. Echad Shor Shehemes, if there's an ox that kills, Echad Behema, V'chaya Shemitzu, if an animal kills, Be'eser V'shlosha, quarter 23, Lezer Omer Shor Shehemes, Be'eser V'shlosha. This means only once they killed Ushor, and all the other animals that kill, you don't need a court. Come along and kill them, and you're meritorious to heaven. Zachar l'shamayim, like Rish Lakish says. Rabbi Akiva says that they're put to death in front of a court of 23. Rabbi Akiva, Haim the Tanakama. What's the distinction between Rabbi Akiva and the Tanakama? They both say that they're put to death in front of a court of 23. So this distinction between them is between a snake. According to Tanakama, the snake is like the lion and the wolf, 23, whereas Rabbi Akiva says that the snake is different from all the animals. But the snake is always a muad. And so about a snake, he would say, whoever comes along and kills it first is meritorious. Does not like the snakes. Then we said in the Mishnah, we only adjudicated a tribe on the basis of a court of 71. So what did the tribe do wrong? What was the tribe's sin? You want to say the whole tribe decided we're going to go to the movies on Friday night. They desecrate the Shabbos. Okay, they draw a distinction in the Torah between the individuals and the majority as it relates to idolatry. But here, by other commandments, why everybody should get their own individual punishment. We're not going to punish everybody in the tribe because as a group, because they went to movies. Each one should get their own individual punishment. So we're talking about a tribe that served idolatry. And then, so therefore we view them as like a city that went astray, and we judge them in 71, and we kill them all by the sword. So you want to say that such a tribe is going to judge like an Irani Dachas, like the city. Come on, look, Rabbi Yoshaya, like Rabbi Yochanan. It must be that this is not like Rabbi Yoshaya or Rabbi Yonasan. Tanya, Ad Kama Osin Irani Dachas. What's the population amount to make this city like an Irani Dachas? What's the amount? Meaning to say, we're talking about how many people in the city have to worship idolatry, not in order to make it an Irani Dachas, and not how many people have to be living in this city. That's what the Rambam says. So, if you have from 10 to 100 in the city, it's going to be considered who are worshiping idolatry. make it like a Irani Dachas, which would basically say that it's a certainty that everybody in Washington will be put to death. But don't worry, we're saved because later on we'll see that if there's even one mezuzah on the whole town is saved. So Gemara is going to say in Sanhedrin and later on that there's a position, we'll see, that there never was such an Irani Dach. Whereas from 100 to the majority of the tribe. I feel B'Yonasan will come around Rubo, the majority of the tribe, cool, but if the whole tribe worships idolatry, even Rabbi Yonasan would say we don't view it as Irani Dach, we kill them by the sword. We view them as individuals. Court of 23. We're talking about the Nasi of the tribe that sinned. The Nasi sinned. Then we're going to judge him a court of 71. Milo Amar Ravada Barava Ko Davra Gadol Yaviu Elach Advar Shal Gadol Hainami Gadol. So this Nasi is judged. So that's the first answer. And we'll see more answers, God willing, in tonight and tomorrow morning back to the usual schedule. Shikoyach.